saying, or probably more to the point not saying, to sort of get things back on track. For one thing, China is not saying it's moving to get talks resumed anytime soon, that it reports it's in no rush to redo the talks. It's also indicated right now that the U.S. is using bullying behavior and that they will not respond to bullying behavior. So that's China's way of saying, look, we're in no rush to do something that we think is wrong. So if that means this drags on, then what are the implications of that? The China Learning Curve author, Dan Joseph, says, if it comes to that, we could deal with this. I guess it would depend, though, by definition, Dan, how long it lasts, right?
Yeah, exactly. Neil, good to be on the show. The longer it drags out, the more economic pain there will be on both sides, so the more incentive there will be to change positions. At this point, you would have to say that, at least economically, the United States is in the stronger position, more economic momentum, per capita GDP 4 times China's, better reputation in the global capital markets. So right now, we're better positioned. But who could absorb more pain over the long term? That's hard to tell at this point.
You know, it's interesting, Dan. Over the weekend, we learned that the Chinese, obviously, they pay a lot to the American press. They pay a lot of attention to the markets because they know the president does. But one interesting development I heard, Dan, is that they were focused on polls, early as they are, even in key states like Pennsylvania, where the president presently trails Joe Biden by 11 points or so, as if polls at this stage even matter or mean anything. But to me, that indicated they want to weigh his chances. Can they roll the dice and wait for a different president? And if that's what they're saying, that means possibly no deal with this one through the remainder of his term.
Yeah, I think you could build a good case for the possibility that China's just going to dig in and take a harder line and wait and see what happens. I wouldn't say that's the most likely outcome right now. I still think both sides are motivated to avoid economic pain and get a deal done. But all the ingredients are in place for China to take a harder position. There's a lot of hardliners in China that would like them to do that. From their point of view, they can withstand the pressure, at least politically. And they even think that they have a fair amount of international support when they look at the fact that although the U.S. has taken more drastic measures against Huawei, most of the international community seems to be willing to continue to cooperate with the Chinese telecom company. And China thinks it's the international reaction to its One Belt, One Road initiative has been fairly positive. So you could build a case that China might just dig in here and wait to see what happens, which will probably mean that we'll get increased tariffs on both sides and a tariff war that has a much deeper and harder bite than we've seen so far.
No, they're limited what they can do to us because they import a lot less from us than we send to them. But do you think they'd risk trying to devalue their currency? Do you think they'd risk trying to sell some of their Treasury securities? I think it would boomerang on them, but your thoughts?
No, I think you're right. I think the Treasury security thing is a misnomer. That's not going to be a big problem. The United States is a safe haven destination for capital. The markets are liquidity. The Fed has a lot of tools it can use. China owns a lot of U.S. Treasuries, but it's only 10% of the total or less. So I don't think they can really do anything there. The big thing to worry about is China can turn the pressure on U.S. companies that don't just export to China, but do business in China. I'm thinking of Apple, Ford, GM. Lots of U.S. companies make very good profits in U.S. And, it's not just exports that support jobs, but it's profitability and growth. And so China could start to kind of turn the screws on those companies. That would really ratchet up the trade war, and that would have an impact on our economy. Now, again, they're probably more exposed to us than vice versa, but there will be pain on both sides if this thing gets ratcheted up much further.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Dan Joseph, the China Learning Curve author out of Pittsburgh. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
All right, some news.